allow everybody to enter that hopefully is joining us today. So, first of all, big welcome to everybody joining today. My name, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nicola Mann. I am Day Job Director of People and Governance for Brentwood and Rochford Councils in Essex and Vice President at the PPMA. So, welcome everybody on this Friday afternoon. You're all here to learn from the wonderful Alex Colton, who is Cornerstone's UK's public sector expert, about strategic organisational planning and designing a future-ready agile workforce. So Alex has got some slides that he's going to go through and talk us through how and what we can do to kind of think about how we do get future-ready. And then there'll be opportunities to ask any questions at the end. If you want, you can pop them in the chat as we go, and then me or Alex will pick them up as we go along, and we'll do them at the end. If we can ask everybody to go on mute unless you are invited to speak, that would be helpful. And the session is being recorded, so you'll only see the speakers. So for those of you that are on, you won't appear on the video, the recording, but it will be available to everybody hopefully at next week some point, so on the website and via the email. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Alex and let's get on with it, Alex.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you for that introduction that really builds me up to something that you're going to be all disappointed. No, I'm joking. We've got some good content for you. Just check that you can see the screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. So, you know, as advertised, we're here today to talk about strategic organizational planning. And that's a term that I'm keen to elevate from strategic workforce planning, because the workforce should be about the organization. It shouldn't be about just the people. It should be about how we create higher performing organizations. So just to kick off and introduce myself, if I can get my slides to work. There you go. So I'm Alex Colton. I'm not going to go through this slide because you can obviously read it. But I've been a member of the PPMA for some years. My past at Essex, I'm working for the fabulous chair of the PPMA, Pam Parks. I had the pleasure of that for about 5 years. And for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be talking really high level about this organizational planning concept, skills, new things to consider like workforce agility, and how we can use our HR function and our skills within HR workforce and org development to contribute to a higher organizational performance. And I'm going to be sharing some research from some of our partners in that as well. As I say, it's a little bit high level because, you know, I can only cover so much in 25 minutes, but I hope there's something that you can take away, whether that's, you know, a spark of an idea, whether that's empowering language or terminology that you can take back that elevates conversations within your teams, or even just sharing our further resources, which I've got a lot for you to share with you at the end. So let's jump in. So I want to share this slide first and foremost, because this is Cornerstone's mission, ultimately. So this is what we live by here at Cornerstone. But the reason why I'm sharing it for you is because I think it's really pertinent to the public sector at the moment. I think it'd be interesting to see your comments in the chat on this, and my colleague Yvonne will be responding to them. It'd be interesting to hear your views, but workforce in public sector seems a little bit lost through cost cutting, that salami slicing of budgets, but also social pressures and social media and what people are saying about the workforce, when actually what they should be considered as look, this is one of the best assets that we have. And if we can leverage that asset, we can have higher organizational performance. So we'll dig a little bit deeper into this, but I just want to share it because, one, it's our critical mission, something that we all live by here at Cornerstone, but also something that's quite simplistic, but powerful in its nature. And look, we need to change our workforce so that they're driving force behind organizations and organizational performance, and not just seen as a cost center, which, having worked in local government, that might not apply to all, but it certainly applies to some and some functions. So in terms of looking after our workforce, it's hard because the pace of change is unprecedented. I hate that word, completely overused word. So apologies to Yvonne in marketing, who's going to tell me off afterwards for saying this. But actually, it's about, we've always talked about the pace of change and change coming at us and being ready for that change. The difference now is what we're seeing is the pace of change is massively accelerating. So the research from McKinsey, for example, we're talking about 800 million jobs by 2030. 2030 is not that long away anymore. It's 5 and a little bit years, and we'll blink and we know we'll be in 2029. But that looks very different in terms of work going forward. Gig economy, remote working, hybrid working. We've been through that, but actually we're only just starting to see the impact of it and the impact on that job. So 800 million jobs, but also 800 million people potentially displaced in those jobs. Another topic we've talked about for years, and I remember going to a CIPD and a PPMA conference probably 5-6 years ago, where we're talking about 5 generations in the workforce and being ready for that. So again, this isn't entirely new research, but what we're starting to see is the impact of it, right? So we're seeing particularly the new generations coming in and having completely different expectations for what they get out of work. And in public sector, that's tough because you have a particular culture that you're trying to shift, and that's not always the fastest thing in the world. So you've kind of got 5 different generations all expecting different things from their career pathways, what the organization does for them, their learning and development plans, all of that kind of stuff, even how managers talk to them. That is very, very different to what it used to be. And finally, this is a bit of a funny one for someone from a HR software company to talk about, but it's the explosion of data and technology. So you think, research from Sapient says that an average HR function has 16 HR tools in their organization. That's crazy. So imagine 16 different platforms, 16 different data sets that's coming into those platforms. How do you bring that together to create a strategic view, to have that conversation at a board level that says, this is how we change the organization, this is the skills we need, this is the L&D budget that we need? You can't possibly do that with that many platforms and that many data sets. And yeah, there's ways of bringing them together through BI and things like that, but the reality is it's too much to handle. Going on in terms of world of work's always been complicated, right? I'm preaching to a bunch of HR professionals who live and breathe this kind of every day. But this, again, the pace of change on this is getting faster. And so, I'd put a challenge to you. And again, happy to hear, be really interested to see your views in the comments. How many of you have marketing in your job profile? But how many of you, probably very little actually, but how many of you do marketing as some part of your day-to-day work, whether that's marketing around a new policy, a new structure, a new employee benefit? You're all kind of doing different skills that aren't necessarily in your job profile. Every local gov authority, every public sector organization, come to think of it, have some kind of different transformation program. I look after 60 of Cornerstone's accounts, and I see everyone having some form of transformation program. And that is typically a small group of people using the resources across the organization. So that's tough, right? How do you balance being part of a transformation program as well as doing your day job? But also, how do you bring the right skills into that transformation program? So one, it delivers, but also the output of that transformation is sustainable going forward. So that world of work is becoming more complicated more quickly. So this is the crux of this problem statement that we see from our research, from Gartner, from McKinsey, from a lot of our own research that we conduct, is that the ability to adapt to change is out of sync with the pace of that change. And what that means is organizations, typically, whether that's private or public sector, can't keep up with that pace of change in order to deliver the resources, the workforce resources, and the capabilities to the organization. So there's 3 aspects to this, right? First one is the required skills that you need as an organization are changing faster than you can upskill, that you can teach people, that you can put people through programs, or that you can hire. We've talked about the expectations of different generations, but actually at an individual level, what are the expectations? And a lot of our research points to it's really hard actually to meet the expectations of your people's development. And finally, that was the point that I made before around visibility into workforce data to navigate the required change at that level of pace. How do you become agile in this, in terms of making sure that you're getting the data to drive the insights, to drive the change? And all this points to is a term that we pretty much coined at Cornerstone, which is the workforce readiness gap. And we've coined it because it's not a point in time, it's linear, right? So if I give you an example, tomorrow you might need HTML5 skills, and you look across your organization, you don't find them, you have to go out to hire, you end up bringing an expensive interim. that costs more money than it probably should have done. So you could go, we're probably going to need HTML5 skills for the next 5 years. So let's upskill some of our own workforce to do that. You're doing that at this point in time. But actually, in the next 5, 6 years, what you might see is a whole different programming language to come in that you need to react then to. And then again, you're kind of following the same process. You're bringing interims, you're putting expensive programs around that particular skill set. And then the kind of time expires. So you need to be thinking about the current, but also the future. And that is what we define as the workforce readiness gap. And actually, there's 3 really good sources on here around what it means if we don't look at that gap. So Gartner surveyed over 1,000 HR leaders in top companies globally. And 57% of them says skill shortages undermine corporate performance. I'm surprised that actually is not higher, and I'll be interested in your views on that again in the chat. The second one is scariest for me, is that barriers to transformation. So how do we transform? Again, we've all got those transformation programs. How much of those transformation programs are talking about the required skills for the future within those transformation programs, and even the skills to deliver the transformation in the first place? I've seen a lot of these that kind of talk about service redesign, service delivery, rationalization. But what I don't talk about is what does our skill set look like in the next 5 years, and how do we get there? What does the business operating model look like, and how do we get there? And then finally, this is 8.5 trillion of unrealized revenue. It doesn't really apply to public sector, but turning it on its head, thinking about productivity, there'll be a gap there. Thinking about service delivery, can we honestly say we're delivering really great, outstanding services if we know this number exists? Probably not, in terms of what it means for local government and public sector. So failure to close the workforce readiness gap really fails to deliver on those 3 things. So look, how do we solve this? And there's not one straight answer. This is our view of the world, I think, and there's probably some debate about this, but again, this is instilled in an awful lot of research. And again, it's not massively new, it's not massively controversial, but actually to close that readiness gap, you must align your people and organization. And align, I fear, is probably don't want to use the word weak, but actually those 2 things now need to be symbiotic. You can't have a workforce strategy over there, an organizational strategy over there, with tenuous links between them. They need to be one and the same thing. So that's why this formula exists, and it's all centered around workforce agility. So the definition of that workforce agility is the ability to respond quickly to change and exploit those changes as opportunities. So there's 4 things there I'm going to kind of let you read through, but it's all around actually more recognition that organizations can't be this top-down approach anymore from any aspect, from job design, from L&D programs to career pathways and talent management. And actually what our research found is that high-performing organizations actually have both. They have a top-down strategy when they need it, but they also have a bottom-up strategy that kind of meets in the middle. So you're meeting the expectations of your employees while deploying the skills where they're absolutely needed. So there is kind of a balancing act now in terms of high-performing organizations and how they're approaching organizational development. So workforce agility, we work with organizations, and some of them like UCL, like Essex, like there's a hell of a lot of in the public sector, Bristol University, Leeds City Council. There's a lot that we work with that we're starting to talk about workforce agility strategy. So how do you get that workforce agility? How do you cope with that pace of change? And these are 3 aspects that we think are important to that. So it's developing the right skills quickly. We'll go into some detail in some of this, because this is, again, it's high level, but we want to get into the detail. We want to talk about connecting the goals of your people and managers. So that whole, what we would in the HR profession probably think about performance conversations, needs to be absolutely turned on its head. And some organizations are really good at this in terms of actually let's talk about a development conversation. Let's have regular check-ins instead of a massive appraisal process. So it's much more tailored to, again, that meeting in the middle of employee versus what a manager needs. And the last one, again, I'm going to change the terminology slightly, because you're designing the workforce you need. Yes, absolutely, that's one part of it. But the bottom up side is actually deploying the workforce that you need. So where you've got your skills in a particular part of the business, are they in the right part of the business? Are they working on the right projects? Are they working on the right transformation program? And all of this, right? So you can't do this without technology. And this isn't this isn't a pitch, I promise. But actually, if you get your data right, that's enabled by the right AI powered data, you're kind of off to a winning start. Because these days you talk about skills and benchmarking skills, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You can't do that en masse with the resources that you've got. So you need to deploy technology in a strategic way to think about things like skills ontology and that kind of thing. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And this is sort of connected to that, but it's a slide that I wanted to put in because I think there is a mindset shift that organizations need to go to, and particularly the ones that I speak to in the public sector. Again, if they want to become a really high performing, high productive organization, they need to flip their thinking a little bit. And this doesn't mean getting away with, doing completely away with structures and hierarchies and layers and spans of control and all that stuff. But what it does mean is changing the thinking around how they deploy resources. So traditionally, we've always been caught up in this should be boxes, not circles. I'm giving Yvonne a lot of feedback today. But you put your person in those boxes of job profiles or job descriptions, and suddenly all they're doing is that particular job, and that's a very traditional way of looking at it. But actually, some of the high performing organizations that we work with, AstraZeneca, PwC, Deloitte, they look at the capabilities that they deliver. So they put the person and their skills at the center of their project, and they're deploying those skills very differently. So I know for a fact that PricewaterhouseCoopers don't really have management structures as such. They have career coaches to develop the career, but actually what they do is look at the project, look at the problem statement they have in front of them, use skills accordingly, and put their skills around that particular issue. And look, I'm not going to pretend this is going to be really easy particularly for local government, public sector, because it is mindset shifting and it is cultural shifting. But look, these are the three things that can help you get a head start, or at least make a start on this kind of workforce agility concept. The first one is collecting relevant and accurate skills data. Now, I said you can do that with AI. You could probably do that off, a spreadsheet for a very small group of people that proves the concept of what you're trying to achieve. You need to think about the skills infrastructure. What are you doing in terms of your L&D? How are you pointing it at the skills gap that you might have within your organization, rather than just designing an L&D project that you think you might need? And that finally is that culture shift. So, how do we get people to go back a page, out of their boxes and into the circles on the right hand side that is aligned to the particular problems that you face as an organization? And I promised to talk a little bit about organizational planning. We've talked about everybody, that's on the webinar right now would have had some form of input to a workforce strategy or strategic workforce planning. You all will know the 5 rights methodology by the CIPD. But our research is telling us, actually, if you take that focus, what you're going to lead to is that same traditional approach of people in those boxes doing rigid jobs. And actually, you can think about it from a skills perspective. So skills is one of the 5 rights. But actually, if you think about all these aspects through a lens of skills, you'll come up with a much better way of thinking about organizational capability. And that's very much easier then linked to what you need to deliver as an organization. Where are you going? Which leads to organizational performance. So it's just one to think about, and one that I haven't got huge amounts of detail on because of the time, but actually we've got some resources to share with you on that. And again, talking about workforce agility strategy, it's a slide that we've shared with a few customers, and they are actually taking this approach and kind of living and breathing it now. And it's fairly simple, right? There's nothing too controversial in here, but actually you start at that benchmarking and assessing what skills do you have. If you can use an AI-driven platform like Cornerstone or one of our competitors, ideally Cornerstone, but actually, look at the jobs that you have. The AI can then tell you, actually, these are the skills that you should have. And then you align that with your self-assessments, your peer assessments, your line manager assessments to get that level of skill proficiency, but also the enjoyment and interest piece. So again, you can meet your employees in the middle in terms of what they're deployed to and what they're not. And then you're kind of looking at that data and saying, right, how do we close those skills gaps? So your L&D, as I said, is centered around closing those skills gaps now. They're not centered around, your yes, you need some degree of compliance, but actually it's a data-driven insight that enables you to close those skills gaps. And you can look at that now, but you can also look at it as a future state as well. And that then helps you deliver this personalized experience, right, to all of your people, and that kind of takes away the management or the mismanagement or the misexpectation of your different employees, because it's so hyper personalized on what skills they want, what skills they have, and what that gap looks like, and the proficiency gap within those skills. And then the final bit, which I think is the most important bit, is the strategic deployment. So when you've got programs coming up, when you've got transformation programs up, you can align the right level of skills, the right resource to those different projects to see a higher level of impact and a higher level of performance. This kind of goes into a bit more detail on how do you create the required skills within your organization. So this is a very individual level. So this is job A or person B, whatever you want to think of it, and actually their skill set. So they've kind of said, right, or the AI have said, this is the job that you do, this is the skills that you have, this is your proficiency, this is where you're expected to be by the business. And then this is the gap, right? So then their L&D is very much, again, hyper personalized around what that gap might look like. So this person here needs some work on communication. They can fill that by a number of different ways. That doesn't have to just be L&D content. That could be mentorship. That could be project roles. That could be shadowing. That could be anything. But what you're doing is personalizing that experience around that particular skills gap. And then you kind of start to layer that up. So then you say, right, as an organization, we have a particular problem around occupational health and safety. We have some people that's interested in it, but the proficiency levels are quite low. So actually, what are the programs that we need to invest in around that? And suddenly what you're doing is creating a whole talent strategy based around what that skills gap looks like. And again, I know I'm banging on and probably boring you about this deployment, but actually using data to deploy strategically in your organization is going to put the best people against the projects that require those skills, and you're going to see a far greater result as a result of deploying your skills strategically across your organization, rather than thinking, okay, I need a job that does this here, let's recruit into that role. You're thinking about how much time and effort have we spent upskilling this person. So we're going to deploy them now, which then leads to a question around return on investment. And it's a very different concept for public sector, completely understand that. But actually deploying your skills is the number one thing that I would think about in terms of that final piece of that jigsaw. You've got to deploy your skills in the right way. So just to wrap up and give you a bit of summary, the problem, and this is one slide that you can take a photo of or take away, and hopefully this gives you a bit of a different terminology or language that you can use internally. But we talk about the problem being the workforce readiness gap, made up of the skills changing faster than you can upskill or hire. We talk about those expectation differentials between your organization, your managers, and your individuals. And we talk about the visibility of the data for you to be able to make the required change. And that will lead to that workforce readiness gap. What we're saying is one particular answer on this is that alignment between the people-centric development and the organizational goals and vision. And remember, that has to be hand in hand. That can't just be here and here. That has to go together and be systematic in a way in terms of defining your organizational goals and vision and defining the skills that you're required to deliver on that organization vision. And that's about workforce agility. And I've got some more resources on that. And the methodology we shared with you, which is around benchmark and assess, close skills gaps, develop and grow, and strategically deploy. So that's about 23 minutes I've been boring you with. I'm very sorry about that. But actually, there's some further resources that I think really talk to workforce agility. They talk to the technology that can power some of that stuff. But first, just want to reach out and say, look, if anyone wants a one-to-one conversation, I am the public sector lead here at Cornerstone. I enjoy these conversations more than my actually day job in terms of learning about your organization and providing not just the advice and the experience that I have, but also into some of our thought leadership teams that work on this stuff on a day-by-day basis. So that offer for a one-to-one conversation is out there. Secondly, we have an ebook, which is around workforce agilities for dummies. But actually that tells you a lot of detail around that workforce agility concept. So that's a QR code. Yvonne's going to put the link in the chat as well for you in case you want to use the link rather than the QR code. But it's a free resource that you can talk about, that you can read, explore, and share in terms of workforce agility as a concept. And there's a state of the skills economy report that we have produced. So again, we'll share the link, and obviously you can use the QR code to download this particular piece, but it's brand new research. It's around global state of skills economy. It will tell you a lot around what some of the problems are around skills and what the gaps are. And finally, we have a webinar coming up on the 22nd of October. This is a Cornerstone-led webinar, not a PPMA one, but it talks about how our galaxy of products can help solve some of the issues around the workforce readiness gap by using that workforce agility approach. So that's very much embedded in workforce data and skills, but also those bits that make the skills gap disappear, which is the learning piece, the really good conversations around elevating performance, and also the transformation piece in terms of getting your data in the right space. So that's it. Thank you very much. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to stop sharing and then hand over back to Nicola.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Lots there to take in, really. So I think you've stunned everyone, because I don't see any questions in the chat.
It's a really hard concept to talk about for 30 minutes, and I could probably talk about it for 2 days. And that's why I'm very keen, like, if anyone wants to take this as an idea, to get in touch with us, and we can take them through it kind of on a one-to-one basis.
Perfect. Chris, I don't know if you're unmuted, but we can kind of hear your conversation, so you might want to put yourself on mute. Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, as you were saying, Alex, you've crammed a lot into 30 minutes. So I do appreciate it is a lot of information. So obviously, as Alex said as well, Yvonne's put some really good links in the chat. So take the opportunity to kind of download those information documents, and also there's a link for the webinar that Alex mentioned. So, but yeah, being as there are no questions, we can let you off lightly.
Wrap it up just on time. Look at that.
That's it. Perfect. Good teamwork.
We'll take that, Nicole.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex.
Awesome.
And thanks for everyone joining this afternoon, and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you all. Bye.
Take care. Bye.